The year is 1988, and director Taylor Hackford jumped onto the nostalgia train, running rampant through the late 80s with this long-winded puff piece of Americana, focusing on Gavin the Grey Ghost Grey, an all-American college football star who Forrest Gumps his way through 25 years of American history, refusing to let go of his football hero ego. Along for the ride are his nephew, aptly named Cake, his long-suffering formy beauty queen wife named Babs, and his big bear of a best friend named Lawrence, a football buddy with a penchant for gambling and convenient racism. With an all-star cast consisting of Dennis Quaid, Timothy Hutton, Jessica Lange, and John Goodman, none of whom convincingly portray the younger and older version of themselves, this film is a sure favorite for old white college football fans and waspy women who love cinematic soap operas. This week on Back to the Balcony, we cover 1988's Everyone's All-American. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert, two titans of cinematic review. Sometimes right, sometimes wrong, but always captivating. Your hosts Antonio of the Cult-Worthy Cinema Podcast and Justin Henson of the Movie Wire are here to take you back to the balcony. I mean, you kind of get a feeling of how I felt about this movie from my description, right?
I get what you're throwing down, and I'm almost offended because I think you're calling me a white woman, but I don't know. We'll get into it. But what are your thoughts on this one?
Okay, dude. So let's start off the bat. Never heard of this movie. This is like one of the last ones of our lists of things that we've never seen before we get back into familiar territory of films that we like and appreciate that Siskel and Ebert covered. I had to pick this one because I thought that Dennis Quaid needed some redemption, right? We covered Great Balls of Fire, and I was very critical of his performance. He was probably more defended by you, but you did have second thoughts on the film after the nostalgia goggles wore off over time. You agreed that the film, the context, the subject matter, the way it was portrayed, not the best. But you did like the energy he brought. And for me, I thought it was kind of cartoonish, almost Jim Carrey-ish, right? So since this was a drama, and when I read the reviews of it, the reviews for the most part from other critics and the Rotten Tomatoes score weren't terrible. So I'm like, well, maybe this was a hidden gem. Maybe this is something that we just missed over time, didn't get a lot of talk about. There's only like 1,500 reviews on Letterboxd, so it's in the same boat that we're in, where we weren't really exposed to it as other people weren't. So how do I feel about it? I don't hate movies like this in general, right? Like, it is a sappy drama. It does really pull on those Americana heartstrings that so many people of this day and age, 70s, 80s, early 90s, like our parents loved this shit, right? And I feel like if this was a movie that I saw as a kid with my mom, I'd probably have a closer attachment to it. So that being said, I don't hate what it's trying to do. I don't like the package that it's wrapped up in. I'm not a huge fan of the actors they chose. I'm not a huge fan of all the sentimental 60s and 70s Nat King Cole music they play endlessly throughout this movie. But I do like a good story of a guy who never really redeems himself, and that's kind of the whole point. I like tragic characters like the Grey Ghost, where until like the day he's about to die, never lets go of that football hero ego and how it affects everyone around him. I love that part of the movie. I will say that I did like Dennis Quaid in this performance. It's everyone else in this movie that just kills it for me. But we'll get to that in a second. What were your initial thoughts of this movie?
I'm almost on the opposite. And in no way, let me just say, I did not like this movie. This isn't, we talked before the show, this could have been a Justin movie, but this one, it does it pulls on all the right heartstrings with me on things that just almost manipulate me into liking something. And this is where we're going to differ. I love the music of it because it is the only thing that draws me back into this chaos of a story. The music matches kind of what it's trying to portray, but the dialogue doesn't match what the premise is trying to do. It almost reminds me of the more recent Here with Tom Hanks, where it goes chaotic in point A to point Z, and it tries to fill as much junk in the middle as it possibly can to get an emotional reaction. And it kind of puts a bow at the end of it with a happy ending that doesn't feel earned. So, but the music is good, and the music really entices me to want to hang on to kind of the end credits of the little snippets that we get over the lifetime. So I can understand what it's trying to do. It's ambitious. It's really trying to do something that's different from the typical telling of a sports tale where everybody's all American, but we don't get that sports motivational tale. We get the characters walking around Dennis Quaid's character of attempting to show the effect of fame, the effect of self-absorption within Dennis Quaid. And to me, it just tries to do way too much. And it would have been much more strategic to just take almost either be a sports movie or be a family movie with tragedy. So it tries to do too much and it really doesn't equal out at the end. And that's where we do get that last attempt at the musical soundtrack, the music soundtrack to really give us that emotional reaction. And it bought me in the last 5 minutes and said, I feel for this movie until I had to slap myself across the face and say, no, this isn't right because this definitely wasn't earned.
So it's funny that you say that because I kind of went down the rabbit hole of this movie and the story and the novel that it was based on. And I could tell instantly once I read the synopsis of the novel why this movie bugged me. This movie is very, very safe. It never goes too deep into the racism that it's trying to portray. It tiptoes around it, right? Where the novel apparently goes really hard in the paint with the racism of it. But also, there is something to be said about this character, this gray ghost character played by Dennis Quaid. And this is why I thought that this would be a Justin movie. This movie reminded me very much of Mr. Holland's Opus, where we are following a kind of unlikable yet magnetic personality throughout the whole movie. That's what I really gathered. It's like, oh, it's Mr. Holland's Opus, but with college football. And we're going to go through 25 years of this guy's life. The difference is that we are kind of told this story through the eyes of his nephew, played by Timothy Hutton, who he's good in some movies, but generally Timothy Hutton is a guy you just put in a movie when you just need a white guy in a movie, right? He's safe. He's just there. And even though he has these seductive moments with Babs, played by Jessica Lange, he never feels the least bit threatening sexually or violently or aggressively. Like, he's such a bland character. It's like if you were watching The Great Gatsby and Tobey Maguire's character was just boring, right? He didn't have that reactivity to all the things that are happening around him. That's what this kind of feels like. But going back to the novel apparently ends violently, where he doesn't get an all-star ending. He doesn't get a reunion. Instead, he tries to murder his wife because of infidelity, and then when she gets away, turns the gun on himself and kills himself. Closing credits, the end. You know me, I'm dark as hell. That's the movie I wanted to see, right? So when I saw that's how the novel ends, I'm like, and we got this sappy shit of him going to like his big reunion and getting this his laurels at the end of this long, hard life, blah, blah, blah. You're right, it wasn't earned. And it felt safe and forced because that was not the original ending of this story. It's hard for me to like sympathize too much with this dude when even after all these years of after all these years of football injuries, he still gets to be like the golf pro and play golf all day and get paid. Like, the stakes are never that high. And even when they are, Jessica Lange as his wife bails him out and becomes like this huge corporate identity for this fast food chain. Like, her life turns out fine. I never feel like they are in such dire straits that they're about to be homeless. Something always works out for them. So without those stakes, the journey just really doesn't feel that interesting.
Well, it's like right when there is a hint at stakes, the movie transitions to something else. And then it's never truly explored. Jessica Lange is on the phone in one scene, finding out her financing, finding out when she's gonna lose her home, how much money she has, and then it just kind of goes somewhere else. There's really nothing that's really addressed here to show hardship, to really buy into these characters. And I'll be honest, even though this might be a Justin movie ending, I kind of like the novel better because the ending here just kind of happens. And I'm just like, the last 30, 45 seconds, I'm just like, what is happening? We go to this reunion. They magically look in each other's eyes and fall in love again. I don't get it. So to me, I think this movie is subject to, like you said, being too safe and not focusing on one thing. It's trying to just pin as many tails on the donkey as it can in hopes to get an emotional reaction and hope that the crescendo of build with all these characters will come together. And it really never does. It just feels like I'm at a family's house watching a slideshow of events that happen over time. And what I do appreciate about this movie is the fact that it does try and not give us for love of the game or something that's just so romantic that it loses focus. It just shows the normality between game and success, or where you peak, between when you peak and between when you fail. So, but at the same time, it's a wasted opportunity because we can't tell what this movie wants to be, whether it wants to show symbolic nature of the peak of stardom to failure to family life, of hardship between stardom. I don't know what to focus on with this movie. And I can pick and nitpick a lot of things that I did like on the ambition, but right when I'm starting to get engaged with this movie, it tears it away and goes into something different. A good example would be Lawrence, the John Goodman character, who is kind of the stereotypical big boy of a football team that kind of was at his peak in high school and never really did anything. And I loved Goodman's performance. I love the hints that we have some conflict there of what's going on in his life. But again, it's never truly explored. And by the time I'm really invested in this character, he's off. He's done. And I think that would have been a great character build and a great chemistry relationship between Quaid and him going into the climax, even though, again, it probably doesn't match the source material, but it would have at least been more interesting because that is the most interesting chemistry of the film.
Yeah, so you made a great point earlier in that speech, is that this movie does not romanticize football, and it doesn't really romanticize nostalgia. What it romanticizes is the camaraderie of football players, and it really focuses on the idea that, like, apart from themselves, they're not really liked by a lot of people in the sense of true friendship. They're idolized or they're hated if they lose a game, right? It's all very superficial. So it romanticizes the loneliness of this character, that without Timothy Hutton and without John Goodman, he practically has nobody. And the fact that as much as he appreciates them on the outside, he does very little in return to help them in their time of need. Everything for him is self-serving. So when we do have the John Goodman, let's say, character collapse, it's almost 100% expected because the Gray Ghost was never there for him. It was always a self-serving, one-sided relationship, especially with Timothy Hutton's character. That is a self-serving relationship as well. He doesn't do anything for that guy other than you're the guy I'm going to show my success off to. You're my little nephew who idolizes me, and so I'm going to drag you along and you're going to be my cheerleader. And then eventually that kind of flips, that narrative flips where Timothy Hutton realizes, oh, I don't need this guy to make myself better. In fact, I don't think his wife needs him. And that kind of creates a situation with them, which feels kind of forced, but it was totally expected. I mean, the very first scene they share together, you're like, these two are going to bang at some point in the movie, right? So that wasn't big of a surprise. That is, like, I think the biggest issue with this movie, like you said, it doesn't know what it wants to be, but it's not romanticizing football and it's not romanticizing the nostalgia of the era because it really does focus on the racial tensions of Louisiana during that time. And I liked those moments where we do get like some Forrest Gump type stuff where, oh, Timothy Hutton's character just happens to be outside the lunch counter for one of the very first sit-ins where we see the civil rights movement, right? I thought that was going to be a bigger part of the story. It's not. It's just a stopping point. It's just a bus stop on the way to something else. So it's interesting that it goes through those time frames, but it's a shame that it didn't spend more time in those interesting eras and goes back to the loneliness and ego epidemic that Dennis Quaid's character has. Since the critics mention it, we have to talk about it. So one of the things about watching this movie for the first time, not knowing anything about it, is I did not know that there was going to be such an expansive time jump from the start of the movie till the end. So for the first 45 minutes easily of the movie, you've got these actors, Dennis Quaid, who was 35 at the time, Jessica Lange, who was 40, and John Goodman, who was 38. For the first 45 minutes of the movie, they're playing 20-year-old college kids, and I did not buy it for a second. I honestly thought, I'm like, if this is where we're staying for this movie, god damn, I'm not ageist at all, right? But there is something to be said about 40-year-old Jessica Lange playing a 20-year-old college beauty queen. I love Jessica Lange in some things, but I was just like, this isn't working. And then halfway through the movie, when, okay, now we're 5 years later, now we're 10 years later, I'm like, okay, I get it. But that really caught me off guard, that they were really trying to force these upper 30s, early 40-year-old actors to play 20-year-olds. I mean, John Goodman was in season 2 of Roseanne as Dan Connor playing a 20-year-old linebacker. I didn't buy it for a second.
I'm with you. I can give in to the fantasy. It's almost like the 25-year reunion started in the beginning of the movie, but it really lost the fantasy. And I swear, I love John Goodman. I'll watch anything he's in. He is such a good actor, and he is so huggable and lovable. But right when he appears on screen is where the fantasy goes away, because he does show his age and he does show his almost maturity level. He's like the 40-year-old man hanging out at a college dorm party.
Right, he's Frank the Tank, essentially.
Yeah, and it is so obvious. So I can buy into Quaid and Lange trying to portray younger people in a fantasy, but it's just right when Goodman comes on, I'm like, guys, come on. This has got to be the worst casting idea ever. And it kills me to say that was such a good cast, because they're all fantastic. But it's not viable. It's not believable. But I have to morally say that the performances are still good. The performances are still decent enough, even though the betrayals of being college kids is not believable.
Yeah, I mean, like they own it. That's what I can say, is that they go into those characters 100%. There isn't a moment where I feel like they are ashamed of playing so young. They really buy into the role, and that shows. But at the same time, I was just like, wow, that is a choice. I mean, it was tough enough trying to believe that Tom Hanks was 18 years old in Forrest Gump when he's like running through the high school football field, right? Like, that was a challenge for me. This is a bigger one. But, you know, I guess if you can suspend your disbelief and just let the performances do what they do, it's not a bad thing.
Well, my
Um,
biggest question to it, though, is they did such a decently good job on aging Quaid at the end, where it's not too over the top. It's pretty believable. For the love of God, de-age him in the beginning and just make it somewhat believable. It's just a little bit of more cosmetic makeup, and you're there. Well, I don't know about John Goodman, but at least for Quaid and Lang, you're there.
it's funny too because this is 1988. This is before the CGI de-aging process. I actually don't mind the suspension of disbelief compared to the CGI de-aging, right? I mean, Righteous Gemstones actually does it better than a lot of the movies in the theater do. They make John Goodman 30 years younger, and it kind of works compared to like the de-aged Michael Douglas in Ant-Man or Robert De Niro in The Irishman, right? So, I would much rather have the suspension of disbelief and be like, all right, these kids are 20 instead of the CGI de-aging. But yeah, Timothy Hutton, though, it's funny because the critics mention something later about him. I'm not going to spoil it, but that is the problem is that he's already naturally young looking and he's much younger than these other actors. And he's supposed to be like a year or two younger than them. So that does make it hard to swallow when you see them obviously older and then him kind of just constantly looking too young for the role that he's playing in many of those scenes. Again, that's a casting issue. And I'm sure once you're in production, it's not like, okay, we're going to Marty McFly this and fire the guy and bring someone else in. Like they were too deep into it. So, yeah, that's just to me a complaint that as a viewer, I think is valid, but I can see if it like my mom watched this movie, she wouldn't care because she'd be absorbed in the drama and the melodrama and the soap opera style of it. So, yeah, that's my opinion on the cast.
They want to gain attention, and this movie needs to gain attention. And you know what? I'm not going to fault the movie for that because give me good doo-wop, chubby checker any
Yeah.
day to gain my attention. Because honestly, without that music, I would have been bored out of my mind because there was a point where I had to take a break, and it's no fault of the movie. It was fairly entertaining for what the movie is, but I had to take a break, but the music came on. The "Let's Swing Again" song came on, and I was back into this movie, and I was engaged. So the soundtrack is stereotypical. It's what you would expect in this era. It uses well-known music of this era, and you know what? I ate up every single song, even though it was stereotypical. And that's just me because if you want my buy-in, if you want me to be engaged into a movie, I'll give you a little hint and a cheat code is have some good, cheesy, catchy music, and I'm back invested into into the movie. So that's what it does well to me is it counterbalances some moments that aren't entertaining with some stereotypical music. So I'm not going to fault the movie for that because it realizes we don't have shit going on. So let's put some catchy music in and gain some attention from the audience. And maybe that will give the artificial feeling of pure entertainment.
So before we get into the reviews of the critics, I have to say, like, I think one of the things that this movie disappointed me with is that its structure is just so recognizable. I already said it. This is the Great Gatsby, so to speak. You've got the same character dynamic of Great Gatsby where there's a love triangle, there's the exuberant character, there's the real studious character who's analyzing and essentially recording everything. He is essentially our narrator, even though it's not a narration, but we are watching the movie through his eyes. Very Great Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald-ish. But also, like I said, when we are focusing on the gray ghost character, on Dennis Quaid, and he's like this likable prick, but he doesn't really grow. So we don't get to really accept the journey with him. He just stays in the same idea. They even mention it in the review where he has the same haircut, that football flat top that he carries for 25 years for the movie. It is kind of, a totem for this guy, and it's kind of sad because he never grows out of this persona, even though his body and his talent and his ego age faster than everyone else. He still doesn't let that part go. So that's very interesting, but there's not, like I said, enough growth. So when the end does come and it's not a tragedy like the novel, it just feels very empty. That's my biggest issue with the movie. I think there's really great performances in it. Like I said, they are all in. They bought into the ridiculousness of playing 20-year-olds, and then very convincingly people 20 years older than they were actually, in the movie. The actors are probably paying 55, 60 by the end of the movie. So I loved that they could take that journey, do it well, not feel too theatrical with it, where, oh, I'm an old man now, and here's my old man voice. They don't do that. It feels very convincing. I think if it wasn't for this cast, the movie would be a total failure for me.
Agreed. And I think there was two pivotal moments here of what this movie could have been. And I wish they would have just focused on it. We have the hotel scene with Goodman and Quaid, where Goodman's trying to reminisce and he's trying to remind Quaid of a play that they did, but Quaid says it doesn't matter. I don't remember. And then fast forward, he's reminiscing to his wife and Hutton on this play that he did through a recorder or an audio cassette, and he's reminiscing and nobody cares. So these are the two counterpoints that really needed to be connected to give that emotional reaction. But this movie is full of just points. It just goes from point to point to point, with topic to topic to topic, with no substance in between. So it really needed to be a romance, a sports movie, or a symbolic film to really show the rise and fall in clarity. And I really think with these actors, it really needed to be that rise and fall aspect to it, and it really needed to focus on it. And that's why I am so pissed off that Goodman wasn't in it more to really support that message, because to me, I took a couple notes on Goodman's performance, and then by the time we get to the end, there's really nothing to support the messaging when it comes down to it. So all we're left with is pure nothingness.
Before we get into the reviews, I think the thing that makes me chuckle the most about this movie is at the very beginning of the film, we've got a younger Wayne Knight from Seinfeld and Jurassic Park as this kid who is taking a piss next to Quaid and wants to shake his hand because he's all fascinated that the gray ghost is peeing next to me. I looked him up at IMDb, and his character is called Fraternity Pisser. And I'm like, oh, that's just great. That's on his resume. That's on IMDb. That Wayne Knight played the fraternity pisser in Everybody's All-American. You got to start somewhere.
I'll take that. I will end with this is my biggest gripe with this movie, and I had to text you on it, is this is the first time in a movie I felt awkward watching this movie by myself, is the prolonged sex scene in the end credits that Quaid is literally going from layer of dress to dress to dress to dress to dress. And then it's just prolonging sex, and it literally for like 2 minutes. And that's what they want to end this movie with, this romantic ending, supposedly, with just Quaid undressing Laid into a sex scene for like 2 straight minutes. It was so awkward that I almost couldn't even put my eyes on the screen.
I have to say that is a trope that I am so glad died in like the 90s, where you are watching a montage of things that happened in the movie over the closing credits in slow motion. That pissed me off too. Exactly when you were talking about that, I'm like, oh yeah, I hated all of that. Harry and the Hendersons did it. So many movies in the 80s and 90s had like this emotional montage of, here's the song that we're gonna play, while there are all these clips from the movie that we already watched as the credits roll over them. Yeah, I agree. All right, let's hear what our guys had to say about this. This was Gene's to bring to the show.
The story we think we know pretty well. A football hero winds up banged up and unprepared for life after he plays his last quarter of football. The film's only major variation on that story is that his wife's story is told too, but not very well. That's a disappointment because the film stars Dennis Quaid and Jessica Lange, and they are fine actors, and the script is not equal to them. The main problems with this film first are that it's overstuffed. It tries to tell too many stories, even one about the gray ghost poetic nephew played by Timothy Hutton, as well as a lot of social commentary about the 60s and 70s and about racial relations during that time. The other problem is that Jessica Lange's character and performance are not first-rate. Quaid dominates the story. He's very convincing. He does a good job. But Lange uses too broad a Southern accent and seems to be playing down to her character. We know her or feel her to be brighter than she appears to be on camera. It's an ambitious film, but say for Dennis Quaid's continuing fine work, Everybody's All-American doesn't score.
Okay, so his commentary on Jessica Lange, that's just Jessica Lange. Like, Jessica Lange has that accent in literally every movie and TV show she's ever been in. She played Joan Crawford in a TV miniseries, and she still used that accent, right? That's just Jessica Lange. I don't know what he was expecting. As for the rest, the Timothy Hutton complaints, 100% valid. Telling too many stories, 100% valid. I can't really disagree with him on much that he said in this review.
No, I think he's almost spot on. But when it comes to Lange, I think you're absolutely right. But I think what he missed the boat on is there's no dialogue to really support an emotional element with Lange. So she is just literally cruising through scene to scene. And when it comes to the direction and character direction of this, how do you get motivation from this character without giving substance to the viewer? Because there is really nothing here to give us any kind of insight to what Lange is feeling until we get kind of maybe to the last act of the movie, where we do get a little bit of conflict, and because we have that romance with Hutton, whatever. But again, it's never focused on. There's really never a focus. And how do you give a character motivation if there's real no focus? So Lange is literally playing Lange to really just get through this character. So it is a Lange performance, but there is really no way to really drive a motivation out of this because there's a lack of dialogue.
Okay, the lack of dialogue, but this is another point that I've made before on this podcast. I am not saying that men can't write for women. What I will say is that a man who does not know how to write for a woman writes like this. He makes very broad strokes that are recognizable and melodramatic because in his mind, that is what a woman is feeling. That is what a woman is doing. So I don't think it's a problem with her as much as this character is vapid. It's empty because he is literally writing her as a utensil for Dennis Quaid's journey. And that's it. There is the stakes that she goes through, the emotional reactions she have, they are so stereotypical and just common in a story like this that it doesn't seem interesting because we've seen it before. It is soap opera formulas that she is going through because he does not know how to write her. He doesn't know how to write words for her to say. So instead, the writer is literally just taking things he's seen and heard from TV and other movies and transplanting it into this story. She is not crazy and wild-spirited like the characters in Great Gatsby. She is, like I said, a waspy, probably very privileged Southern belle who married the football star and never really had a life until she made one for herself later. I'm not saying that's not interesting, but the dialogue and the scenes that she's given take all of that journey away from the film, and it gives it all to Dennis Quaid.
You're 100% right, because this is the definition of a true supporting actress, because all she is situational. There is just surface level I don't want to say surface level performance because she does her thing, but this is a surface level character. It's cardboard. It goes through the motions just to, like you said brilliantly, is to support Quaid's character. So there's no real, it's so easy for critics to compliment Quaid because everybody else in this movie is supporting Quaid. And that's where this trap of a movie really gives Quaid more credit, because he has to be the shining star, because all the other performances is there to kind of catapult him. So I think you're absolutely right.
Well, I mean, she's there to catapult Cake, the Timothy Hutton character, too, because he has to bang her at some point, right? So his journey is boring, too, because he's literally just the observer. He's the conscientious, objective person of the movie where it's like, I'm just going to watch these characters go through their lives and maybe I'll write about it later. Yeah, so she has to be there for him to be interesting as well, too. It is a shame that there are so many female characters like this written. But again, I don't think it was meant to be malicious. it was written by someone who does not know how to write well for a woman.
I agree with you, Gene. I found this movie to be almost endless, and it's not much longer than the average movie, but the problem is it has the same scene over and over and over and over and over again. And then it's punctuated by the periodic return to the script of Timothy Hutton playing the nephew.
Yeah.
Now, one of the distracting things here, and it's not Timothy Hutton's fault, is that somebody decided to show the passage of 25 years by changing his haircut and facial hair in every appearance that he makes, so that we keep seeing, first he has a mustache, then he doesn't, he has a little beard here, then he has a full beard, then he doesn't have a beard, then he has his hair this way, that way, and the other way, until eventually that becomes a running joke in the movie that distracts you from anything that the character wants.
What did you think?
Most people are like the Dennis Quaid character. They comb their hair the same way from the time they're teenagers until they die.
I love this. This is why I love Roger, because Roger notices these things and calls them out. It's one of the reasons why he was such a great critic, and not even just a critic. When he would do his essays, he's a film observer and appreciator, and these are things that stick out to him. Whatever ADHD he had and hyper focus on movies, it's the characters. He's 100% right. Timothy Hutton's character never changes performance. What they do is they put a little beard on him, or a mustache, or a long hair, or sideburns. Right? They literally like Inspector Clouseau him throughout the movie just to make him look like it's aged, but nothing changes 100%. And like I said earlier, what I respected about him is like how Dennis Quaid's character, the Gray Ghost, keeps that same football flat top throughout his entire life. We all know guys like that who have done that. In a sense, I'm that guy. I've had the same haircut for like 15, 20 years, right? Maybe a little bit longer at some points. But yeah, it's like, it's just who you are and you just roll with it. It's not like he's always changing who he's trying to be. He's afraid to let his past go, and it represents himself in the haircut. So I don't know if that was the director's idea, the writer's idea, or the makeup and production designer's idea. It worked great for Quaid. It's a disservice for Timothy Hutton because it's just ridiculous that they just put all these different disguises on him throughout this 2 hour and 7 minute movie.
I'm glad you brought up your haircut because I was about to get insulted because I've had the same haircut since 8th grade. So I'm not going to...
If it works, it works.
I'm not going to fault Quaid on his haircut, but I didn't watch this review until after I watched the movie. And I got to tell you,
Same.
that I was laughing my ass off on the different disguises, the different looks. So, and I can see the intent of it, which the intent is, how do we portray the time difference? How do we make it believable? And this was probably the worst idea of portraying a time gap between characters, because it does come across as comical, where we're halfway through the movie and we're guessing what facial hair Hutton's going to have next, or how big his sideburns are going to be, or what style of hair he's going to have. And I guess it's to symbolize growth. I guess it's to symbolize prestige in a way. So, but it's done so ridiculous that you can't take the intent seriously. It's almost like a lazy attempt to kind of do the time gap. We saw it in the beginning where you get clips of the time era, and then that is just kind of gets scrapped, and then we just get Hutton with different disguises. So to me, I think it was just, they were trying so many different things new to kind of give an impression of how they're aging, how our characters are progressing in time. But they forgot the easy way is just do it lazy and make it understandable, and put, you know what, a newspaper clipping in a transition or something like that, and just go along with the day and keep Hutton as a growth character, as a motivation, or a catapult, as we spoke to earlier with Quaid. So I think they tried to, again, do too much and not keep it simplistic on how to grow this movie. And it is absolutely, Roger's right. It's comical, it's ridiculous, and it just doesn't work.
The fact that he calls it a running joke, I did laugh every single time he showed up with a different disguise. And the thing is like Lang and Quaid, and especially Goodman, they don't change much throughout the movie, right? Like, she might wear her hair a little bit different or change her dress, or she's pregnant in the scene, right? And then Goodman, I think the whole point is that he never grew out of his high school persona, that destructive person, and that is why he doesn't last throughout the whole entire movie like Quaid does. But yeah, that is such a funny thing that they decided to really focus on making him change. And even his character towards the end, so like Patricia Clarkson plays his love interest at the end of the movie, like the last 15 minutes of the movie. She shows up and she's great as always. And there's an awkward scene between he and Jessica Lange when, like, I guess she's in the bathroom and Dennis Quaid's outside mowing the lawn or something. And she asks him if Patricia Clarkson is good in bed. And that felt so awkward because she never seemed interested in his love life or sex life and almost was kind of like, not necessarily ashamed, but let's not discuss our one night together, our little fling. I feel like that comfort level, if they haven't talked in years, to just be that upfront and kind of aggressively asking him something so personal, it seemed so out of place for her, right? And that really bugged me because it almost made me dislike the character that I grew to like throughout this 2-hour movie. I almost didn't like her towards the end, which makes that ending that we were talking about, where there is conflict, the secret comes out, and you think everything's gonna go away, but he's like, oh, no, baby, it's been 30 years and I love you. It's like, what? Where was the fireworks? Where was the punch? Where was the end of this friendship? They just don't touch on it at all. So yeah, to have that much build up and no climax for that whole story, it just feels like we got cheated out of a better ending for this movie.
100%. And it kind of shocks me a little bit that Gene and Roger didn't bring that up, because even when we get to the climax where they, again, bring it up where, hey, you find me my one night stand, does that not matter? So they bring it up, but again, it's never explored. It's just like, we're checking in. Make sure you remember that this happened in this movie in case you fell asleep during that scene. So this actually did happen. So there is a bigger issue with this movie. I think both our critics are really missing, and it boils down to the writing. But at the same time, I think that is a more important point in this review, to really bring out every single flaw of what makes this movie so unappealing and uninteresting, because it just does too much. Gene touched on it, but these are key points I think our critics should have brought to the table.
They finished off with this.
Well, maybe there's one time you have a mustache or the hippie era.
Perhaps, yeah.
That's why I think it's too ambitious, if you will, because they're trying to tell a lot of different stories here. If they'd stayed on the couple, it would be more interesting. Do you agree with my assessment? Quaid is good, but Lange was disappointing?
Quaid is good. Lange's character, I think you're right, was too much of a caricature. And then later on, when she becomes a businessman,
there's not enough
the
time
Southern Belle thing, that isn't really developed.
100%. That character is kind of like left out to dry. So I think my final say on this movie itself is that it just doesn't feel like a complete movie, which is enhanced by the fact that it's 2 hours and 7 minutes long. And I feel like we just did not get the entire story. We just got a lot of, like he said, the same scene just spread out over multiple moments of a 25-year period. It's like, I'm rich, I'm broke. I'm rich, I'm broke. I'm rich, I'm broke. Black men good, black men bad. Black men good, black men bad. Like, that is literally the whole story. And that the fact that, like, okay, how many football teams is he going to go to and suck, right? Like that, I don't care by the time he's on his third or fourth team. I don't, and obviously Jessica Lange doesn't either, because every time he goes to a new team, well, I'm not going with you. It's like, what else do we got besides this? So for 2 hours and 7 minutes of that, I cannot get on board with this movie as a recommendation. That being said, I'm glad I saw it, and I appreciated a lot of what it was trying to do, especially with the characters, but that will not overweigh the flaws that you and I have pointed out.
Yeah, and you forgot the Hutton character as a bookmark in certain checkpoints here, just to keep us in check. And you're 100% right, because this one, I have to be fair. Did this movie entertain me? It did, but for the wrong reasons. I was hoping it would lead somewhere. I'm hoping the payoff would have been good. I'm watching this about an hour and 45 minutes in, and I said, okay, there could be a redeeming factor here if they tie it up with a bow, and they never do. It actually is cheaper than the entire movie. For a 2-hour movie that we're sitting through the same stuff over and over and over and over and over again, they have to at least give the viewer something to end on a positive note. And it is just a cheap payoff.
We had the exact same opinion of Great Balls of Fire, where it's like it took a very easy way out. It did not end with the real consequences of what happened to those two later with the public and how everything kind of fell apart for them. They just drive off in the sunset, right? And okay, you guys know the story because, again, that was a biopic. You can't end it too bad because you want to use the music, and Jerry Lee Lewis is like a producer and stuff. But I felt the very same way, where it's just like, I feel so unsatisfied. Like, I did not get to take my last bite and wipe my mouth off and say, okay, that was great. It wasn't. It was very incomplete. So as for the review that Gene gave, I 100% agree with everything he said. I had a lot more to say, but I always do. So for that, I can't help but give him an A. I agree with him.
I think that's completely fair. And I wish I was reviewing Gene because I think he was more detailed than Roger. It's hard to critique Roger on this one without putting his written critique into it because he only vocalizes Hutton's character, really. So to me, if I have to combine his written review that goes into more depth on a lot of the plot holes in this story and a lot of the lack of story, I should say, in a better word. So I'm going to give him 2.5 stars because I think it's fair that he does give the obvious in this televised review. But I think in his written review, if you can go read it, it does give a little bit more depth to more story holes. So combined, I'm going to give him a solid 2.5.
Right. And this is one of those occasions where neither of them is a contrarian to either's opinion, right? That might be the reason why Roger has less to say because Gene already said it, you know, and he doesn't want to just repeat everything that Gene said in his own words. So he's going to point out the things that Gene didn't point out. I agree. There's probably a lot left on the table that he could have brought up, but Gene covered the bases pretty well. So I can see why Roger didn't have as much to say about the film. I'm honestly surprised that this movie is as obscure as it is, especially with, you know, John Goodman being such a big draw these days. I mean, Dennis Quaid, I feel like he's always been kind of in and out of the zeitgeist, but Jessica Lange, especially from like the American Horror Story, I feel like she would have been a draw for younger generations to go back and explore her previous works, right? Yeah, anytime like, you know, these younger millennials and these Gen Zs are watching stuff that's modern and they see these older actors, they want to go back and discover their catalog. And this one was even off of my radar, and I've seen shit ton of movies. So yeah, it's an interesting film. I'm glad I saw it, but I have zero interest in revisiting it or recommending it to anybody.
This is one that, again, I'm with you. I'm glad I saw it. I think the performances were solid. It's always good, again, to me to see John Goodman, Dennis Quaid. I'm Dennis Quaid out. But I think overall, this is a one and done for me. But again, I'm glad I saw it.
Yeah, cool. Well, we're starting to get into our comfort zone again. Films that we like, films that we maybe wanted to revisit and see what Siskel and Ebert had to say. So for your pick next week, you are bringing The Dream Team. We're getting crazy. We're getting crazy with Michael Douglas and Christopher Lloyd and Peter Boyle. That's a fun one. I have never watched the review of Siskel and Ebert on it, so I'm curious to see what they thought. And yeah, I'm excited that we're getting back into our comfort food films.
I figured it was time for a fun comedy that just makes you feel good. So I can't wait for this conversation. I have yet to hear your opinion on The Dream Team, and I'm looking forward to that one.
Oh, I mean, if I haven't sent you a rollied-eyed emoji, it probably means that I'm down, right? Cool. All right, good conversation. So everyone, thank you for watching, listening. Like always, go to Apple, Spotify, any of your podcatchers. Like us, rate us, review us, give us 5 stars. Also, subscribe to our channel on YouTube so you can see our faces. You can find me and my other show, the Cultworthy Cinema Podcast, over at thecultworthy.com. And my friend Justin here, you can find over at
themoviewire.com.
Once again, thank you for watching, listening, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.